It all started on a random Tuesday morning. The kind that should have meant nothing, a quiet day off, sun creeping through the blinds, the smell of old coffee lingering in the kitchen. She was still in the bedroom, probably scrolling through emails or snoozing alarms while I was finishing up the dishes. There was a calmness to it, the sort that made you feel like life was moving exactly how it should. And then her phone slipped. I didn't mean to drop it. It was sitting near the edge of the counter where she'd left it charging overnight, and I bumped it while wiping down crumbs. It hit the tile floor with a soft clack, face up, thankfully not cracked. I bent down, picked it up, and was about to set it back when the screen lit up. No passcode. Just an open photo gallery, like it had been the last thing she looked at. Now, I'm not proud of what I did next. I didn't have a reason to snoop. At least, I didn't think I did. We were engaged, for God's sake. We were planning a wedding in spring, picking out plates and bands and flowers like it was all we had to worry about. But something about the thumbnail showing on the screen, it caught my eye. It was her sitting on a bed. Not our bed. I tapped on it. She was in a Cornell t-shirt, hers worn out and faded, the one she always said was for lazy Sundays only. She looked good. Smiling, relaxed. Too relaxed. Her legs were crossed, the angle clearly a selfie taken with the front camera. But it wasn't the pose that got me. It was what was behind her. There, in the mirror on the wall behind the bed, was a man. Shirtless. Wrapped in a white hotel towel. What hair? Walking out of a bathroom. He wasn't looking at the camera. He wasn't posing. He was just there. The room was unfamiliar. Pale walls, hotel-grade headboard, minimal decor. Nothing like our place. My chest tightened. I zoomed in on the mirror. It wasn't blurry. The guy was very real and very much not me. I stared at that image for what felt like forever, every logical part of my brain kicking into overdrive, trying to explain it away. Maybe it was old. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe he was gay. Maybe they'd been drunk. Maybe it meant nothing. But even as I thought it, I knew. That wasn't just some funny memory from a bachelorette party. That was recent. I could tell by her hair dyed darker just a couple weeks ago. Her nails done last weekend. That shirt, she'd worn it 2 days ago when we binged Succession on the couch. My throat went dry. I didn't plan a confrontation. I didn't even know what I was going to say. But I walked into the bedroom, phone still in hand. She looked up from her laptop, blanket wrapped around her legs. Hey, what's up? I said nothing for a moment. I just held the phone out. She took it, glanced down, and her face didn't even change. Not really. A blink. A little head tilt. And then a chuckle, too easy, too casual. Oh my God, she said, handing it back to me. That's from Melissa's bachelorette weekend. Miami. That guy in the background? That's O'Brien. He's gay. Totally harmless. That was it. No hesitation. No guilt. Not even a second glance at the picture. Why is it still in your gallery? I asked quietly. She shrugged. I don't delete stuff. You know that. It probably auto-uploaded. It's ancient. I just nodded. Right? She kissed me on the cheek, told me she'd be out for yoga later. I didn't say anything else. But the truth? That picture was dated. And I don't mean mentally. I checked the metadata later. The photo was taken 9 days ago. 9. Not during a bachelorette party. Not with her girlfriends. She was out of town that weekend, some corporate conference in Atlanta. She'd even sent me selfies from her hotel. But the background in those didn't match this one. I didn't bring it up again. Maybe I should have. Maybe most people would have. But something about her answer, it was so smooth. Too smooth. And that's what made it worse. She didn't panic. She didn't stumble. She didn't even try to delete the photo, which would have felt like at least some admission of guilt. Instead, she looked me in the eyes and lied so effortlessly it made my stomach churn. I went about the rest of my day as usual, at least on the outside. Cleaned up, mowed the lawn, answered emails, made dinner. She came home, sweaty and smiling, said she had a great yoga class, and plopped down next to me on the couch like nothing had happened. But everything felt different now. Everything she said came with an invisible question mark. Every smile looked rehearsed. Every I love you tasted hollow. That photo? It became a glitch in the matrix. Proof that something was off. That there were shadows I hadn't seen before and maybe never would have seen if I hadn't dropped her phone. It wasn't about the guy. Not just about the guy. It was about the lie. The speed of it. The precision. She had that answer locked and loaded like it wasn't the first time she'd had to explain away a reflection in a mirror. That night, I barely slept. I laid next to her, her hand resting gently on my chest, and stared at the ceiling in the dark. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to swallow the lie, pretend it was harmless, forget what I saw. But I couldn't. Not anymore. Doubt had taken root, and no amount of reassurance would pull it out by the roots. They say once doubt enters your heart, it's like a crack in glass, quiet at first, almost invisible until suddenly the whole thing shatters. That's what the days after the photo felt like. At first, I tried to keep things normal, routine, but every moment we shared now passed through this filter of suspicion. Every word she spoke, every movement she made, I couldn't help but read into it, searching for signs I might have missed before. She had an answer for everything. Too many answers. Like the next night when I noticed a fresh scent on her jacket. It wasn't her perfume. It was stronger, masculine, like expensive cologne layered under her usual floral tone. When I asked about it, she laughed and said, probably from the Uber driver. He had it blasting in the car. Gross, right? She said it like it was nothing. Tossed her jacket on the chair, curled up beside me, and picked a movie without missing a beat. But my nose wasn't confused. I knew what I smelled. And it wasn't some rideshare cologne. Or a few days later when she told me she was signing up for a new fitness class. Something high intensity, you know? Kickboxing and weights. I nodded, trying to be supportive. But she didn't come home sweaty or tired. Her hair was down, makeup intact, gym bag in hand, but the towel inside still folded. You showered at the gym? I asked. Of course, she said. They've got great showers there. I didn't push it. But the next morning I checked the gym's location history on her phone. It wasn't in her recent destinations. Then came the phone habits. She'd always been casual with her phone before. Left it on the couch, sometimes asked me to answer calls for her. But now? It was glued to her hand. Locked the screen every time I walked by. Took it into the bathroom like it was an oxygen tank. One night, I walked into the bedroom while she was mid-text. She jumped. Literally flinched like I'd caught her in the act of something. The screen flipped down instantly, her smile forced. Just talking to Melissa, she said. She's having a rough night. Tell her I said hey, I replied. I will, she said, but I already knew she wouldn't. Something inside me shifted. I stopped looking at her the way I used to. Not with love. Not with anger either. Just calculation. I started watching, listening. There was a pattern to the lies. And there was a strange, heartbreaking choreography to how she moved through her home now, like a guest rehearsing the part of a loving fiancé. She asked fewer questions about my day. Forgot little things she used to remember how I took my coffee, which shirt I hated ironing. One night, she called me babe, which wasn't strange in itself, except she hadn't used that nickname in years. It slipped out of her mouth like a reflex, and I caught the brief flash of regret in her eyes. Like it wasn't meant for me. I found myself tracing old memories, replaying them with fresh eyes. That weekend 2 months ago when she said her cousin needed help moving and she stayed overnight in the city. I'd believed her without question. Even sent her money for gas and snacks. Now I wondered if there even was a cousin. The way she'd stopped inviting me to work events. It's just boring team building stuff, she'd said. You wouldn't enjoy it. But I remembered when we used to go everywhere together how proud she used to be to introduce me to her coworkers. And her wardrobe had changed subtly. More crop tops. More heels. She said she was finding herself again, trying to be more confident. I wanted to support that. But I couldn't ignore how it coincided with her sudden need for privacy and her vague, last-minute schedule changes. The worst part was how she started withdrawing physically. Not in a dramatic way. Just small things. She flinched when I touched her back in the kitchen. Pulled away faster from hugs. Turned to the side in bed, always facing away from me. She used to fall asleep with her hand resting on my chest. Now it was like she couldn't bear the weight of me anymore. I stopped trying to initiate anything in asterisk mate. I didn't want to feel the rejection. I didn't want to see pity in her eyes, or worse, guilt. I didn't confront her. Not directly. Not yet. There was still a small part of me that clung to the possibility that I was wrong. That maybe I was just being paranoid. That the photo, the cologne, the flinches, they were all just coincidence. Misinterpretation. My imagination running wild. But I knew better. I started keeping a journal. Just small notes. Dates. Times. Comments she made. Places she claimed to go. Receipts she left lying around. If I was going to fall apart, I at least wanted a record of how I got there. One night, while she was in the shower, I sat on the edge of our bed holding a dress she'd left on the chair. It was new. Tight-fitting. Tag still on. I remembered her saying she bought it for work. But this wasn't a work dress. It was the kind of thing you wear when you're trying to impress someone. Someone who's not your fiancé. I checked the pockets. Nothing. But I found a receipt tucked inside the bag it came in, a boutique I'd never heard of. Dated the same night she told me she was at yoga. The next day, she was all smiles. Made pancakes. played music while we cleaned, kissed me on the cheek like everything was perfect. But it felt wrong. Scripted. Like she was covering for something or testing how much I'd noticed. She laughed more loudly that morning. Made more jokes. Touched my arm more than she had in weeks. I knew what that meant now. Guilt? I remember telling myself not to cry. Not yet. Because crying would mean accepting that I already knew the truth. And I wasn't ready to give up on her. Not until I had something more than a feeling. But my heart wasn't listening. It cracked a little more with every passing hour. Every time I heard her whisper into the phone from the bathroom. Every time she said, "I love you," and it didn't feel like a truth anymore, just a line in a place she didn't want to perform. I started waking up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, her side of the bed cold. I'd hear the shower running even though she never used to shower at 2 a.m. I stopped asking questions. I stopped wanting answers. Because I already knew. She was gone. Maybe not physically. Not yet. But emotionally, she'd already left the relationship. Left me. The silence between us became deafening. Not the peaceful kind, but the type filled with words unspoken, questions unasked, confessions choked down before they could ever reach the surface. I remember sitting in the driveway one night, just staring at the dashboard, unable to bring myself to go inside. The house used to feel like home. Now it felt like a place I was slowly being exiled from. She didn't yell. She didn't fight. She just pulled away inch by inch until I barely recognized the woman who used to dance barefoot in the kitchen. And that's when I realized I wasn't watching something fall apart. I was watching someone rehearse for a different life. One that didn't include me. I wasn't trying to catch her. Not at first. I think I was still hoping I'd wake up one day and realize I was wrong, that I'd misread everything. That all the signs, the secrecy, the lies, they'd amount to nothing more than poor communication or temporary distance. We were planning a wedding after all. People said stress could make things weird. Maybe that's all it was. Just stress. But hope is a dangerous thing when you're not ready for the truth. It was around 11 p.m. on a Thursday when I remembered the old email account. Years ago, before she got her new phone and started using cloud storage, I helped her set up a backup account for syncing documents and photos, something she never really used, or so she said. But she never deleted it either. I still had the login saved in an old notes file on my laptop. Back then, it was just a convenient place to transfer files between devices. Nothing secret. Nothing sketchy. But I was out of explanations. I was exhausted from guessing and second-guessing. I told myself I'd check it once. Just once, to put my mind at ease. Or to confirm what I already feared in my bones. I logged in. The password still worked. There were hundreds of old emails and autosync notifications. Photos, videos, PDFs, stuff from years ago, receipts, vacation plans, grocery lists. Harmless. Boring. And then I saw it. A folder called Review Later. Hidden in plain sight. Buried 3 layers deep in a subfolder marked Taxes 2020. I don't know if she thought I'd never look there or if she genuinely forgot it existed. Either way, my hand was trembling when I clicked it open. There were only 4 files inside. 3 photos. 1 video. I started with the video. It was taken in a hotel room. I knew instantly because of the layout, neutral colors, desk with a laminated menu, sterile lighting. She was in the frame, sitting on a bed in pale pink lingerie I'd never seen before. Her hair was up, her laugh a little louder than usual, the kind of laugh that wasn't for me. And then he appeared. Jacob. Of course, it was Jacob. He'd been her work colleague for nearly 2 years. I'd met him at her company's summer party. The guy who always had something clever to say, who remembered everyone's names, who dressed too well and smiled a little too long when he looked at her. They'd gone on business trips together. Conferences. Strategy weekends. She always downplayed them. Said he was married, he wasn't. Said they barely interacted. I believed her. I wanted to believe her. In the video, he was shirtless, sitting beside her on the bed, holding a glass of wine. They were joking about something. The audio wasn't great. But then she leaned over, resting her head on his shoulder like it was the most natural thing in the world. No tension. No guilt. Just comfort. Familiarity. She said something next that shattered whatever illusion I'd been clinging to. It's insane how easy it is, she said, laughing softly. He's completely clueless. Jacob chuckled. You're a great actress. She winked. Well, I've had practice. I paused the video. My jaw was clenched so tight it hurt. My body felt frozen. Like if I moved, the whole house would collapse around me. Clueless. That's what I was to her. Not a partner. Not someone worth protecting. Just an obstacle she was fooling. A mark. I watched the video once more, this time all the way through. She kissed him near the end. Slow. Unapologetic. Not the kind of kiss you give someone in the heat of a mistake, but the kind you give when you've done it before and plan to do it again. I clicked on the photos next. One was of them holding hands across a restaurant table. Another showed her sitting on his lap in what looked like a rooftop bar. The last was blurry but unmistakable. They were in an elevator, his hand tucked under her coat, her head tilted up toward his. The timestamps were recent, all from the past 3 weeks, each one contradicting every story she'd told me, every fake excuse, every "I was working late" or "Melissa needed to talk." She wasn't just cheating. She was comfortable doing it, confident in her ability to cover it up, maybe even proud of how well she'd managed the double life. I didn't know what to feel. Anger, sure. Hurt. Betrayal. But mostly, I felt numb, like the emotional fuse inside me had burned out. Couldn't scream. Couldn't cry. I just sat there in silence, staring at the screen, letting the weight of it all settle over me like a fog. It was over. Not the relationship, though that too, but the illusion, the fantasy I'd built. The idea that we were still in love, that she was stressed, that everything would be okay if I just held on a little longer. She didn't love me. Not the way she used to. Not the way I deserved. And for the first time, I stopped trying to make excuses for her. I backed up the files immediately, duplicated everything on a flash drive, in a hidden folder on my computer, even in an encrypted cloud folder. Not out of spite. Not yet. But because I knew I needed proof. Something real. Something that couldn't be twisted or denied. I didn't confront her that night. She was asleep already, curled up in the bed we used to share like nothing was wrong. I stood in the doorway for a while, watching her, wondering if any of it had been real, wondering if the woman who smiled at me in old photos was just a version she'd outgrown, or if she'd ever existed at all. The next morning, she made breakfast. Waffles. My favorite. She kissed my cheek and asked how I slept. I said fine and thanked her for the food. She smiled like everything was normal. I wondered if she knew, if she could sense the shift, if my eyes looked different now, if she could hear the silence in my tone, the way I was already gone in every way that mattered. She didn't notice. That was the most telling part of all. I didn't feel the need to ask her about Jacob. Didn't want to hear the rehearsed denials, the fake tears. I didn't want to watch her *p***nize her regret. I had all the answers I needed. The video, the time-stamped images, her voice saying the words that burned like acid in my chest. He's completely clueless. Not anymore. I spent the rest of the day making quiet moves. I didn't cancel our wedding. Not yet. But I looked into the refund policy for our venue. I reached out to a lawyer. I started separating our joint accounts. Just inquiries, nothing drastic. I combed through our shared subscriptions, utilities, insurance, anything I'd need to transfer. It felt like preparing for a storm you know is coming. You don't scream at the clouds. You just board the windows and get ready. That night, I lay beside her in the dark and pretended to sleep. I listened to her breathing. I memorized the pattern. It was steady, peaceful. She was comfortable, relaxed, safe in the lie she thought she'd sold me. I stared at the ceiling for hours, letting the images replay in my mind. The video, her voice, the way she called me clueless. I wasn't anymore, and that changed everything. When you finally see the truth, undeniable, ugly, irreversible, it doesn't come with thunder or screams. It comes in silence. A cold, calculated silence that settles into your bones and numbs everything else. That's where I was. Not in a rage. Not sobbing on the floor. Just done. Done pretending. Done holding on to a future that was built on lies. But I didn't confront her. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I didn't even ask why. Because I knew something about her now that she didn't know I knew. She was playing a game. And the best way to beat someone like that? You don't play by their rules. You build your own. That night, I sat on the couch with a notepad and my laptop, planning like I was laying out a heist, not to steal, but to reclaim what was mine, my sanity, my freedom, my dignity. Step 1, lock down my finances. We had a shared checking account, but most of our savings was in a joint high-yield account under both our names. I didn't touch that. Yet. Instead, I opened a new bank account under my name only at a separate bank she didn't use. I set up direct deposit from my job, rerouted all my auto payments, and moved my personal savings, what was left of it, into this new fortress of solitude. Step 2. Digital cleanup. We shared passwords for Netflix, Spotify, our smart home account, and a bunch of random subscriptions. I started going through each one, revoking her access silently. Changed passwords, enabled two-factor authentication. Nothing she'd notice immediately, but by the time she'd try logging in, I'd be long gone. Step 3. The legal groundwork. I didn't want some dramatic court scene. I didn't want to see her face across a table while lawyers negotiated over who got what wedding gift. I wanted distance. Quiet, clean distance. So I reached out to a discreet attorney. Found him through a friend's referral, someone known for handling delicate cases with minimal exposure. I sent an encrypted message first outlining the situation, then scheduled an appointment under an alias. Just in case. Paranoia, maybe. But after what I saw in that video, I didn't trust her with anything, not even the illusion of knowing my next move. The lawyer, Thomas, was calm and efficient. Didn't flinch when I showed him the video or the screenshot TS. He just nodded and said, "We'll build your case around this. But we do it quietly." That's exactly what I wanted. He helped me prepare the preliminary paperwork. Not to serve yet. Just to have ready. He coached me through everything, how to separate assets, how to handle joint property, even how to start documenting behavioral shifts in case it came down to emotional distress or manipulation. Step 4. Evidence archive. I uploaded the video, photos, and metadata to a secure cloud account with two-step verification. I also backed them up on a password-protected flash drive hidden in a drawer in my garage beneath old paint samples and rusted tools. I wasn't going to blackmail her, I didn't need to. I just needed proof in case she tried to flip the story or paint me as the unstable one. Step 5. My exit plan. I started scouting apartments. Nothing too far, just enough space to breathe. I didn't want a roommate, didn't want shared walls with strangers. I wanted a place that didn't smell like her perfume or echo with memories of our engagement. I found a one-bedroom on the other side of town, month-to-month lease, no questions asked. The landlord was an older guy who handed me the keys and said, "Don't bring drama." Perfect. The idea wasn't to disappear overnight. That would give her the upper hand. Instead, I was going to unhook one day at a time, like a patient man pulling a thread loose until the whole sweater unraveled and she wouldn't even know why she was cold. I moved essentials into the new place slowly: socks, shirts, files, chargers. Just enough that if I had to vanish in an instant, I'd be ready. And I didn't tell a soul. Not my brother. Not my best friend. Not even my mom. Because she didn't deserve the theater. She didn't deserve the audience. If she was going to lie to my face for months, I was going to let her watch me smile back every day until the day I left and she realized the lights had gone out and she never noticed me walking toward the door. But the hardest part? Pretending. Pretending like I still loved her. Pretending like I believed her fake work stories. Pretending like I didn't flinch when she kissed me or wrapped her arms around me in bed. I became a ghost in my own life, floating through conversations with forced nods and empty laughter. I cooked breakfast, asked about her day, texted her sweet nothings, all while documenting every contradiction, every careless slip. And they kept coming. Like the time she lost track of time at yoga but had no sweat, no mat, and her hair was curled. Or the moment she told me she was visiting her mom but her phone pinged at a rooftop bar downtown. I didn't confront her. I just made a note. Every lie became another nail in the coffin I was quietly building. I started going for long drives after dinner, telling her I needed air. In truth, I was meeting with my lawyer. Or moving boxes to the new place. Or just parking somewhere and breathing for the first time in hours. Sometimes I'd sit in silence and replay the sound of her voice in that video. He's completely clueless. It used to sting. Now it kept me focused. There was a strange power in that silence. In knowing. In not reacting. She was still pretending too, thinking she had the upper hand. Thinking I was still in the fog. That made it easier. Because when the time came, she'd never see it coming. But even through all the planning, all the strategy, part of me still hoped foolishly that she'd come clean. That she'd sit me down, cry, apologize. Not for redemption. Just for honesty. But she never did. Instead, she kept the act going. Bought me a new mug that said "Future Hubby." Posted throwback photos of us on Instagram with captions like "My Rock." Even left a note in my car one morning that said, "Can't wait to marry you." I stared at it for a long time. Not because it moved me. but because I realized how far gone she was. How easy it was for her to write those words while erasing me from her heart. So I folded the note, slid it into my journal, and marked the date. Just another entry in the story of our slow, quiet unraveling. The final straw didn't come with a bang. It came with a smile. She invited me to a formal event, her boss's estate. Some big client celebration. She was unusually giddy about it. Bought a new dress. Told me she'd arranged a barber appointment for me. Even picked out my tie. I said yes. Of course I said yes. But in my gut, something twisted. She wasn't just trying to show me off. She was trying to prove something. Like a magician prepping for her final trick. And I didn't trust her hands. So I prepared. I backed up everything one last time. I told my lawyer to be on standby. I transferred a bit more money out of our shared account. And then I put on my suit, tied my tie, kissed her cheek, and played the part one last time. I would go to that event. Smile for the cameras. Toast to her success. Shake hands. Laugh at jokes. And I would wait. Because people like her always make one final mistake. And I'd be ready. The night of the event came quicker than I expected. She was electric, buzzing around the bedroom like she was going to prom. Curling her hair. Reapplying lipstick. Adjusting the dress she'd said was just classy enough to impress, but not enough to outshine. She looked stunning, and I hated that I could still feel that. Hate has never been the opposite of love, indifference is. But I wasn't there yet. I was still feeling. Which meant she could still hurt me. She looped her arms around my neck, grinning in the mirror's reflection as she adjusted my tie. You clean up well, she said, voice dripping with rehearsed affection. So do you, I replied, because that's what I was supposed to say. The venue was an estate tucked deep in the hills outside town. Her boss's boss, some exec I'd never met, was throwing it to celebrate a merger or contract or something high-level. All I knew was there would be champagne, speeches, handshakes, and appearances to keep. We arrived right on time. She clung to my arm like I was a trophy. Introduced me to everyone with the kind of sugary tone she only used when she wanted to be perceived a certain way, charming, polished, doting. If you didn't know better, you'd think we were the perfect couple. But I knew better now. And she didn't even sense it. That's how confident she was. Or how deluded. The estate was gorgeous. Marble everything. Servers in crisp uniforms floated past with trays of hors d'oeuvres. A string quartet played under a white canopy and people laughed with that rich, effortless confidence of people who knew their secrets were protected by wealth. She tugged me toward the bar like it was her natural habitat. I'll get us drinks, she said. You relax. Enjoy the view. I nodded, watching as she leaned across the counter and whispered something to the bartender. That was the first moment I knew something was wrong. It was the way she leaned in too low, too conspiratorial. The bartender looked confused at first, then gave her a little nod. She glanced back at me, smiling a little too brightly like she was checking to see if I'd noticed. I pretended not to. When she returned, she handed me a glass of champagne and clinked hers against it. To us, she said, almost too sweetly. One last night before we dive into full-on wedding planning, right? Right, I said. To us. But I didn't drink. Instead, while her attention drifted to a group of colleagues across the room, I tilted my glass slightly and bumped it against hers again, just enough to switch the glasses without her noticing. She laughed at something someone said, lifted the new glass, and took a long sip. I watched her closely. My heart was pounding. Not from fear, but from a horrible, creeping confirmation. A few weeks ago, I'd had a similar drink at home, coffee, not champagne. She'd made it for me. Said I looked tired. I drank it, and 20 minutes later, I felt like I'd been hit by a freight train. Dizzy, heavy, sluggish. I chalked it up to stress. But now, watching her take that sip, I felt something dark twist in my gut. She wobbled slightly 10 minutes later, clutching my arm with a sheepish giggle. Too fast, she mumbled. Didn't eat enough? She excused herself to the bathroom. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. I found her near the hallway by the powder room, collapsed on a velvet bench, head tilted, eyes fluttering. Someone had already called for help. A manager hovered anxiously, and the bartender, the same one from earlier, was trying not to look nervous. She fainted, someone said. Probably low blood sugar. Or dehydration. I crouched beside her, watching her struggle to stay awake. Her eyes met mine, hazy and confused. Mark, she slurred, barely audible. What's happening? You're okay, I whispered, brushing hair from her face. Help is coming. Paramedics arrived within minutes. I stepped aside, letting them work. They asked if she had a history of fainting. I said no. They asked if she'd eaten. I shrugged. They asked what she drank. I handed them the half-full glass she'd sipped from. They took it. Everyone assumed it was just a medical blip. Maybe a long day. Maybe nerves. No one questioned me. I was the loving fiancé standing quietly by, concerned but composed. But I knew better. I rode in the ambulance with her. They ran tests. Said her vitals were normal, but she'd shown signs of sedation. Low alertness. Pupils sluggish. They'd run a tox screen to be sure. She was still disoriented when they admitted her for overnight observation. I stayed until she was stable, then told the nurse I needed to step outside and make some calls. Instead, I drove home. When I got there, I retrieved the flash drive, my notes, the receipts, the *TS. Everything. Then I called the lab I'd quietly worked with a week prior, just in case. I'm dropping off a sample tonight, I said. Same deal as before. Priority rush. Quiet. Understood, the tech replied. I didn't tell them it came from a drink I didn't consume. Didn't explain how or why I suspected it. I just dropped it off, filled out the form, and left. 3 days later, the results came back. Diazepam. Not in a recreational dose. A clinical, controlled amount. Enough to cause sedation in someone my size. In someone her size? A knockout. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a reaction to alcohol. It was deliberate. That changed everything. Up to that point, I'd been building a quiet exit. A non-confrontational break. No courtroom drama. No revenge. But now? Now there was something else on the table. Not vengeance, but defense. She hadn't just been cheating. She was trying to control the narrative. Medicate it. Mute me. For what? To keep me compliant? To knock me out long enough for a rendezvous? To protect a lie? I didn't know. But I had proof now. And I wasn't going to let it slide. When she came home from the hospital, she looked pale and confused. They said I was dehydrated, she murmured. But it felt so weird. I don't remember anything. I nodded. I was scared. I'm okay now, she whispered, pressing her forehead to my chest. Thanks for staying. I didn't say anything. Just held her. And later that night, after she fell asleep on the couch, I opened my laptop and finished the folder. The *TS. The video. The drink analysis. I added a note at the top. You made your final move. Now it's my turn. She came home from the hospital looking like a ghost, thin smile, hollow eyes, the kind of look you wear when the world stops making sense. She moved through the house like she didn't recognize it anymore. Or maybe she was just trying to gauge what I knew. Either way, I said nothing. Not yet. That evening, I sat her down in the kitchen. She thought I was going to ask how she was feeling. Instead, I laid a folder on the table between us. Neat. Organized. Every lie indexed and documented. The *TS came first, texts with Jacob, call logs, hotel bookings. Then the photos. Her in lingerie on a hotel bed. His voice in the background of a video. Her laugh, the one she used to give only to me, now shared with someone else. And finally, the toxicology report. I watched her read each page, her face draining of color. She didn't deny it. Didn't cry. She just stared at the papers like they were written in a language she'd never learned. I don't know what to say, she whispered. You don't have to, I said. I already said everything for you. She reached for the folder, maybe to plead or explain. I stood up. I'm not doing a fight, I told her. No yelling. No drama. Just truth. You made your choices. This is me making mine. She opened her mouth, but the words didn't come. There was nothing left to say. I walked out, leaving her in a silence that finally felt honest. I moved into my new apartment 2 days later. No fanfare. No goodbye notes. Her belongings were packed and sent by courier. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The silence of that small one-bedroom space was beautiful. No rehearsed affection. No tension wrapped in smiles. Just quiet. Clean, honest quiet. I changed my number. Deleted our photos from social media. Blocked her on everything. Not out of anger, but necessity. I didn't want reminders. I wanted distance. She tried contacting me once through a mutual friend. Left a voicemail about making amends. I didn't respond. I wasn't chasing closure anymore. I was living it. In the weeks that followed, I built new routines. Cooked for one. Walked in the mornings. Started painting again. A hobby I'd shelved long ago when life with her got too loud. I even laughed again. Not the polite chuckle I used to fake for her benefit, but real, from the chest kind of laughter. She stayed behind in the wreckage of her lies. And me? I moved forward. No revenge. No bitterness. Just freedom.